Hello, everybody. My name is Archer Haas, and welcome to another Story Time with Archer Haas. This time, we're once again reading Packy and Me by Dr. Matthew Mayberry. Elephant Man Morgan Berry. As I've said, few folks knew much about elephants and how they gave birth in the early 1960s. But one man knew more than perhaps anyone in the United States. Lucky for me, Morgan Berry was my good friend. Morgan and I got to know each other because he boarded three of his elephants at Portland's zoo in the winter. Summers, Bell, Tongue Law, and Pet lived at Seattle's Woodland Park Zoo, where they gave rides and performances. I had vet school training, but Morgan had first-hand knowledge of elephants, especially rare at a time when only 300 elephants lived in American zoos. Our friendship evolved because of a mutual love of animals and a respect for each other's opinions. Morgan and I became closest during Belle's pregnancy. Elated, we were also concerned. Anything could happen. Circus elephant births and subsequent deaths provided that. Ultimately, Morgan and I decided to go with our gut feelings about animals, and let the pregnancy evolve as naturally as possible, just like it would in the wild. Morgan's thinking came from knowledge he gleaned on multiple trans-Pacific voyages to Eastern Asia in the 1940s and 50s. A short, balding man with Walter Cronkite glasses, Morgan no doubt shocked his wife when he up and decided to become an animal importer. Up to then, music dominated his life. Trained at the Juilliard School in New York City, he could bang, pluck, or blow almost any instrument, especially the trumpet. In the 1920s, he played piano and organ in silent movie theaters, and in the 1930s, he boogied as a jazz band drummer and trombonist, often aboard trans-Pacific cruise ships. But in 1948, at age 37, Morgan took a job as the sole fireman on an aged lighthouse tender vessel headed for Hong Kong. Once there, he plunked down his life savings of $7,000 on 30,000 goldfish and an assortment of monkeys and tropical birds, all of which he planned to sell for a profit in the United States. The return trip, though, ended in disaster. The freighter stopped for 7 days in Formosa, now known as Taiwan, to unload nitrate, which explodes if touched by water. No water was allowed to board the ship for a week. Ghastly news for Morgan. His money-making goldfish required 2,000 gallons of fresh water a day. The fish, the fortune, all perished before Morgan got home to Seattle. Such a setback would dissuade most from future endeavors, but Morgan was no ordinary man. Much to the dismay of his wife at home with the couple's four children, Morgan mortgaged his house and again worked his way across the Pacific. This time, however, he already had a customer. Woodland Park Zoo wanted him to be their main supplier of exotic animals and even offered free, temporary cage space for larger animals that he planned to sell elsewhere. That's when I started thinking seriously about becoming an elephant breeder, Morgan told True Magazine in 1969. Morgan Berry's elephant legacy launched in March 1952 with the purchase of 1-month-old Belle. She was born in a jungle camp just outside Bangkok in February. I bought her in March, but it was June before I got her home. Morgan says Morgan says in the 1996 book Elephants Don't Snore by writer Lev Richards. Morgan had learned from India's manhuts that the bond between elephant and man can be extremely tight, lasting a lifetime since both live approximately the same number of years. Knowing this, Morgan raised 35-inch, 185-pound Belle as if she were his daughter. Morgan and his family lived in a two-story house in the Fremont district of Seattle. They had a big yard, carefully screened by big trees, where Barry's ever-changing menagerie of wild animals, birds, and reptiles could indulge in a little outdoor exercise. Liv Richards writes in Elephants Don't Snore. Nervous neighbors grew acclimated, if not accustomed, to the snarling of leopards, the screaming of cougars, the chatter of monkeys, and the roar of lions. Belle, who was potty trained, had free reign of the berry house, but never wrecked furniture. Like other young elephants, she craved attention and fretted with when a family member was not in sight. When happy, she squeaked with shrill delight, especially when shadowing Morgan, his wife, or the children. She followed us so close she would step on her heels and pull her shoes off, Morgan told the Oregonian in 1962. Bill slept in the basement on a hay pile, fenced in by cots. Morgan's sons, Kenneth and Howard, slept on the cots, as if they were as it was their job to wake up every 2 hours to feed the wood furnace. Some nights, though, the alarm clock would ring, waking Belle but not the boys. Wanting attention, Belle somehow climbed over the sleeping boys and snuck upstairs to the second floor where Morgan and his wife slept. Belle would tap us with her trunk until we fed her, Morgan told the Oregonian. I would lie there and toss treats into her mouth. I don't know why I said treats. Treats into her mouth until she quieted down and went back to bed. Belle got the most attention when the family took her on evening walks around the neighborhood or when they piled the pachydermy around town. Uh, when they piled the pachydermy into the back of Morgan's pink convertible Cadillac and cruised around town. Passerby openly gawked as Belle lovingly coiled her trunk around Morgan's shoulders. Once Morgan's sons walked Once Morgan's sons walked Belle to school for show and tell and nearly caused a car accident. Cars came screeching to a halt, creating creating a traffic jam as motorists stared in disbelief, Morgan told Lev Richards. At 1 year of age, Belle stood 5 feet tall and weighed 660 pounds, finally making it difficult for her to maneuver the Barry household. That's when that's when Morgan moved her to the nearby Woodland Park Zoo and ramped up his hunt for the perfect male elephant, Belle's future suitor. The Mahuts had told him what to seek: a well-built male with an even humped back, large clear eyes, a trunk of good girth, and tusks of solid white ivory. Powerful and potent, yet manageable. Morgan found such an elephant in Thailand as soon Morgan found such an elephant in Thailand. As soon as I set my eyes on him, I knew this was the one. I had to have him, Morgan told True Magazine in 1969. Tong Law, then 5, belonged to a Greek who, for some unexplained reason, had been kicked out of Cambodia with just his clothes, his young daughter, and his elephant. Shrewdly, Morgan swapped $20, bought two bicycles and a baling machine for the well-built elephant. Tung Law's name came from Morgan's silent partner Tung Law Puni, Puniantra, who was an attorney, money manipulator, uh, muni, munitions runner, and a general explorer importer. When Morgan told his backer of his plans to make his new elephant more famous than um, Barnum's Jumbo, Puniartia humbly asked that the elephant be named for him. Morgan chose wisely. Fertile Tungla went on to father an astounding 15 surviving children, crowning him as the most valuable bull elephant ever in captivity. 2 years later, also in Thailand, Morgan bought baby elephant Pet, who grew up to be a nymphomatic. Unlike the other female elephants who courted Tongla only when they were in heat, Pet rubbed up against him every chance she got. I think Pet's constant need for sexual attention motivated Tanglaw's ver- virility. The key to captive breeding, though, was Morgan's success at finding a way to handle Tanglaw's periodic bouts of must, which began at age 10, 3 years before Packy's conception. For about 6 weeks each year, Tanglaw had to be locked up alone in an isolation cell. As Shanna Alexander wrote in her book, The Astonishing Elephant, Tanglaw became a homicidal maniac who might charge any man who approached him, even Barry, with intent to kill. To bring Tanglaw out of must, Morgan did what today sounds crude and somewhat cruel. In the infant years of exotic animal study, however, it worked most effectively. Morgan got a transformer from a neon sign and mounted it on the end of a long stick. He'd get in close to Tangla and zap him with that until the rattled animal was up against the wall. After that, Tangla quieted down because the prod really gives a shock. Before long, Tangla would be back to his old gentle self until the next annual bout of must. Eventually, Morgan's animal inventory expanded to include dozens of species. I visited and cared for zoo animals daily, but Morgan literally lived with them. In 1965, wanting to be near the Portland Zoo, Morgan bought an 80-acre sprawling spread near Woodland, Washington, 30 miles north of 30 minutes north of Portland. It was quite the sight. Visiting what came to be known as Elephant Mountain. Elephants, horses, camels, hippos, zebras, and giraffes all roamed the forested acreage. Rhinos, big cats, and bears lived safely in outside pens, and woodland mammals, snakes, and marsupials occupied cages. Elephants had their own concrete and steel barn, but babies always got their bottles in the berry kitchen. The population frequently changed as Morgan bought and sold his inventory. It was a huge job taking care of the 100 or so species that lived on the farm at any given time. Morgan, heavily assisted by his sons, cared for the animals, especially the elephants, who required food every 4 hours. Morgan's neighbor, Joe Woodage, who watched Morgan feed the elephants many times, told writer Shanna Alexander, "You gotta feed 'em when you get up. Feed 'em at noon. Feed 'em again at about 4. Then again at about 10 at night. When you give 'em an extra load of hay. That's 9 loads of hay every 4 hours. Then there's the other end. You gotta shovel." Between 1975 and 1979, after my wife Patricia and I wed, we visited Morgan and his family at Elephant Mountain frequently, usually on Sunday afternoons. They lived in a Swiss-like chalet built by Morgan and his sons, with wall-sized windows staring at the nearby Lewis River and the more distant ribbon-like Columbia River. Morgan, a true Renaissance man, always cooked some wonderful meal and then wowed us with a key-banging performance on his huge Hammond organ. Morgan's life was never dull. Like many ambitious men of our generation, he ran at full speed, challenges needed conquerors. Yet sadly his life has its wounds. Patricia and I still feel sorrow recalling the night in May 1978 that our good friend Morgan needed help. Raised in simpler times, Morgan paid for everything in cash or with in-store credit. He never carried credit cards or wrote checks, so when he needed a plane ticket fast and lacked cash because banks were closed, Morgan leaned on his closest friends. Of course, we raced to the airport and emptied our pockets. It was indeed an extremely tragic day. Morgan's longtime business partner and very close friend, Eloise Berchtold, had been gored and killed by an elephant while performing for the Gatineau Circus in Rock Forest, Quebec. Eloise grew up in Cincinnati, the daughter of parents who were passionate about wild animals, and a similar passion no doubt persuaded young Eloise to run away from home at age 15 to perform with the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. Her considerable talents propelled her through the ranks to eventually land her a headline act showcasing bears, big cats, and elephants. By the 1970s, when Eloise lived and trained at Elephant Mountain, she had earned the widely printed reputation as the world's greatest female animal trainer. Several versions exist regarding Eloise's death. Personally, I think Eloise tripped, perhaps during a fast waltz act in the small circus ring. Teak, among Eloise's favorite elephants, bent to help and accidentally gored his beloved trainer in front of a horrid audience. Loyal Teak then stood guard over Eloise and refused to respond to commands from circus officials and local authorities. I'm not sure what happened next, but Teak was either shot by authorities or euthanized by circus officials. No matter how it transpired, it was a sad series of events. Compounding matters, Ty, one of the three elephants Eloise had on tour with her, disappeared into the nearby forest to escape the chaos. He was lying on the snow in the woods when I got there the next morning, Morgan told the Oregonian in 1978. When I called to him, he staggered to his feet, stiff from the cold, and came running. Morgan later scattered Eloise's cremated ashes on Elephant Mountain. I can't credit Morgan Berry enough for his pioneering work with elephants. His knowledge about the breed and their mating habits comforted me comforted me immensely during Belle's pregnancy. Packy's birth would never have gone as well without him. For that, dear friend, I thank you. Well, that was chapter 3 of Packy and Me by Dr. Matthew Mayberry. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dr. Haas, and I will see you in this next video. Bye bye.